Welcome to Beyond Fortune, the channel where every fall hides a story of new beginnings. Before we start, make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and comment which scene touched your heart the most. That way, you help our community grow and bring more stories like this straight to you. The Hale Mansion stood tall atop the hill, surrounded by glass walls and perfectly manicured gardens. Henry Hale, its owner, was known as one of the most influential men in the city, a magnate who had built his fortune on risky investments and now lived surrounded by luxury and loneliness. Behind the facade of power was a man scarred by distrust, wounded by past betrayals. Everyone who worked for him knew his coldness, his sharp gaze, his relentless demands. But that morning, the household's routine would be broken by the arrival of someone unexpected, someone who would change his destiny without asking for permission. Stella Ramirez climbed the long stone staircase with hesitant steps, adjusting the strap of her bag. It was her first day working at the mansion, and she knew she had to make a good impression. She came from a simple life, used to daily effort, without luxury, but with plenty of dignity. The job posting for a new housemaid had appeared as an unexpected chance. "All I need is a steady paycheck. Nothing more," she murmured to herself. But her heart raced as she passed through the automatic gates. It felt like stepping into a world that had never been meant for her. Inside the mansion, Henry reviewed documents in his second-floor office. The previous night had been consumed by endless meetings and little sleep. With hot coffee still on the desk, his eyes ran over charts and reports. Every number fixed his mind on control, expansion, and surveillance. That was how he had survived, by distrusting everyone and everything. His life was under total control until the moment Stella walked through his door. And in a matter of seconds, that control would begin to crumble. The housekeeper introduced Stella quickly, barely giving time for questions. "This is the new maid, Mr. Hale. She starts today." Henry hardly lifted his eyes from the papers, muttering a detached greeting. But Stella couldn't help stealing a glance at him. He was tall, imposing, with strong features and eyes as cold as steel. Everything about him radiated distance, yet an impossible-to-ignore magnetism. She took a deep breath, reminding herself she was only there to work. As she organized her first tasks, Stella noticed Henry's meticulousness. Every painting, every book, every object seemed fixed in an exact, unchanging place. The mansion breathed silence, reflecting the closed soul of its owner. She felt like an intruder in foreign territory, yet her movements were steady, showing no fear. She wouldn't let the pride of a millionaire drive her away from a job. Little did she know it would be that very pride drawing them together, explosively, hours. Later, Henry climbed the central staircase, arms full of documents. He spoke harshly into the phone, his tone sharp with worry over a fragile deal. His attention was locked on the rapid words and numbers pouring from the other end. A slip on the last step threw him off balance. Papers scattered into the air like snow in the morning light. His body tilted backward, about to crash down, and the mansion's silence shattered with a stifled cry. Stella, climbing a side staircase, saw it unfold in seconds. Without thinking, she dropped the cleaning bucket and ran toward him. Her shoes struck the marble hard as her arms stretched out. "Careful," was all she could manage to say. The next instant, she grabbed his shirt, yanking him with force. Against her, they collapsed together on the polished floor, a heap of breath and shock. Documents drifted gently down until they came to rest around them. Henry blinked several times, trying to grasp what had just happened. His heart pounded not from the fall, but from the sudden closeness. Stella still held his shoulders, her eyes wide from the scare. The weight of his body pressed against hers, stretching each second into eternity. The faint scent of common soap mingled with the expensive cologne of his tie. "You saved me," he murmured, dazed. "I just did what anyone would do." Stella answered. Breathless, he stood quickly, straightening his wrinkled suit, his face hard once more. But his eyes lingered on her, still sprawled on the floor. Inside, something faltered. He wasn't used to being vulnerable. He never allowed anyone to see him weak, and now, he had been literally in her arms. "Get up," he said coolly, extending a hand. Stella hesitated a moment before taking it. When their fingers touched, a strange spark shot through them both. The housekeeper rushed in, startled by the scene. Henry muttered that he had merely tripped, offering no further explanation. But his gaze darted back to Stella, as if seeking some hidden answer. She gathered the scattered papers, her hands trembling faintly. Inside, she still felt the weight of his body, the suffocating nearness. Henry inhaled deeply, trying to erase the moment from his mind. But ignoring the sensation of being saved by someone so unlikely proved impossible. Asterisk in the minutes that followed, Stella hid in the kitchen to catch her breath. Her heart was still racing, refusing to return to a steady rhythm. Never in her life had she imagined that on her very first day, she'd be holding a millionaire from falling. And never had she expected to feel that strange mix of fear and heat stirring inside her chest. "This is ridiculous," she whispered, shaking her head. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't push away the image of Henry's gray eyes. Eyes that, for a brief instant, had looked less like ice and more like flesh and blood. Back in his office, Henry reviewed papers with an even harder expression than before. But every time he closed his eyes, he remembered the feeling of being caught. Her touch burned in his memory, like an invisible mark he couldn't shake off. He hated it, hated not having control over a simple memory. How could a man who ruled over meetings and markets lose his footing because of a maid? He shook his head, determined to bury that image. But his heart, silent and stubborn, had already chosen otherwise. That evening, Stella walked through the garden, admiring the lights reflecting over the pool. She needed air, a way to calm herself and gather her thoughts. The mansion felt too vast, too suffocating, as if there was no real place for someone like her. And yet, part of her felt strangely tethered to the space, as if fate had opened those doors for a reason far greater than a paycheck. She recalled Henry's fall, the lost look in his eyes when she pulled him close. "Maybe I did more than just stop an accident," she whispered softly. From the balcony above, Henry watched her. Silently, he saw Stella moving across the garden like a soft shadow among the lights. The way she had gripped his shoulders would not leave his mind. It was as if she had held not only his body, but something deep within him. Something he never wanted anyone to touch. For a fleeting moment, his expression softened, shedding its sharpness. But quickly, it hardened again, afraid of being seen fragile. The next morning, the mansion returned to its usual rhythm of silence and rigidity. But for Stella, nothing felt ordinary anymore. The hallways seemed to echo with what had happened. Each time she saw Henry, a wave of awkwardness mixed with curiosity rushed in. She couldn't explain why her heart quickened at his presence. He was just her boss, distant, untouchable. Yet the memory of that fall tied them together in secret. Henry, for his part, tried to remain indifferent. He treated Stella as he treated every employee, with cold orders and clipped words. But his eyes lingered on her when he wasn't aware of it. She had crossed through his defenses without asking permission, and it unsettled him, almost irritated him. "I won't let myself be shaken," he repeated to himself. But deep down, he already knew he had fallen. In another way, that very afternoon, a business dinner was scheduled at the mansion. Stella had been assigned to arrange the reception room. As she set the table, she heard laughter and voices approaching. Men in tailored suits, women in elegant dresses, their words dripping with numbers and contracts. She felt invisible, and yet fascinated by that world so far from her own. Then one of them remarked, "Henry, I heard you almost got hurt yesterday, didn't you?" The heavy silence that followed made her hold her breath. Henry answered swiftly, brushing the topic aside. A meaningless stumble, nothing worth mentioning. But his eyes slid across the room and found Stella's. She quickly looked away, as though caught in the act. The faint flush on her cheeks didn't escape him. The guests continued laughing, oblivious to the silent exchange. But between them, something unseen was quietly growing. When the evening ended, Stella collected glasses and silverware in silence. Suddenly, she felt a presence behind her. It was Henry, standing still, hands tucked into his pockets, his gaze steady on her. "You didn't tell anyone, did you?" he asked firmly. Stella lifted her chin, surprised. "I had no reason to. It was just an accident." He studied her for a long moment, as though searching for truth in her eyes. And at that instant, he realized she carried more courage than he had assumed. As she climbed to her room that night, Stella still felt the weight of his gaze. Henry was a man surrounded by walls, yet for some reason, he had left a crack open. a crack she had crossed without meaning to, simply by being in the right place. Or maybe by destiny. Deep down, both of them knew what began as an accident had already become something greater, an invisible bond, as unexpected as it was powerful, and their story was only beginning. The next morning, whispers ran through the hallways like wind through cracks. The staff murmured about the boss's near fall. Stella avoided their glances, focusing on her bucket and rag. She wanted neither a reputation as a heroine nor trouble so soon. But the mansion seemed to breathe differently since the incident, as if every stare remembered what had almost happened, and her name now lived in every hushed conversation. "Miss Ramirez, with me, please," Henry said curtly from the office. Doorway. She stepped in, posture straight, gaze steady. On the desk lay a thick stack of rules and a confidentiality agreement. "Read and sign, in that order," he instructed, without preamble. "And about stairs, try not to run," he added, dryly ironic. "I only run when someone's about to fall," she replied calmly. One corner of his mouth nearly gave way, but resisted. He stood, and for a second his weight faltered. Stella noticed, discreetly, and gestured toward the newly installed handrail. "They put it in last night," she remarked, without pride in her tone. Henry frowned, surprised at the swift service. "I asked the foreman before I left," she admitted simply. "Prevention takes less work than fixing," she added, matter of fact. He nodded, as though storing away something valuable. "You'll be in charge of the private library," Henry decided. "Few are allowed in. Keep it orderly and silent." Stella accepted, surprised by his use of the word trust. At the door, the housekeeper cast her a sharp look. That wing was the pride of the house, a sensitive domain. Any misstep could mean immediate dismissal. Stella drew a deep breath and stepped into the sanctuary of wood and glass. Among tall shelves, the aroma of aged paper embraced her. Filtered, light painted warm bands across the oriental rug. She organized catalogs, aligned spines, polished the desk. Every gesture carried the weight of standing where few ever did. The housekeeper, Elvira, walked by slowly, sizing her up. "Careful not to think yourself special," she whispered coldly. Stella answered with work, not words. During her lunch break, a brief memory crossed her mind. At her last job, she had refused the favors of her employer. She paid dearly for dignity, fired with ruined references. She learned silence doesn't always protect, but character does. She had promised herself never to bend her principles for convenience. Here, it would be the same, no matter the cost. Clean work, head held high, steps steady, while sweeping Henry's office corner. She found sheet music, notes penciled in, markings for dynamics, an unfinished melody. On the closed piano, faint finger traces still lingered. "He plays," she whispered to the empty room, surprised. She put the pages back without prying further. The mansion, after all, hid more than marble and safes. It guarded sounds no one else heard. Henry entered without a sound and saw the sheets in her hands. "Find something you shouldn't?" he asked, voice neutral. "I found music where I didn't expect it," she answered honestly. "That's not part of your duties," he cut off, protective of the private. "Fair enough, sir. I don't charge for encores," she replied lightly. Her answer tugged a fleeting, involuntary smile from him. He changed the subject as if slamming the piano lid shut. His phone buzzed, turning the room into a storm in his palm. "An audit this evening, a gala tomorrow, short-staffed," he summarized. "I need someone who listens and doesn't draw attention." Stella understood the subtext before the request came. "You want me to serve as a discreet bridge." She translated. "Temporary assistant, today and tomorrow only," he confirmed, brisk. "An order?" she asked. "Trust," he corrected. Rare. The wardrobe became a dilemma before sunset. The in-house tailor laid out a simple, elegant suit. Stella faced a mirror she wasn't used to confronting. Neither wealthy nor small, just fitting her own stride. "Just for today," she repeated, adjusting the hem, to remind herself of limits. Elvira watched, impassive, offering neither advice nor reproach. In that house, silence weighed more than applause. In the car, the city slid by in lights and glass. Henry drove the way he thought, alert, economical, precise. "They put handrails on both staircases," he noted shortly. "Thank you for listening to the suggestion," she replied plainly. It wasn't about you. It was about risk. He defended. Risk doesn't pick its targets, she countered, watching the night. And both found themselves thinking of the same fall. The gala smelled of expensive flowers and cold promises. Stella lifted her clipboard and steadied her breath. She quickly learned the map of tables and names. Henry moved in controlled orbit, performing rituals of power. She exchanged discreet notes, smoothed crises with minimal smiles. A waiter tripped. She caught the tray midair. Some falls, it seemed, she was born to prevent. Behind a screen, two executives laughed with scorn. A heart hail, one mocked sharply. Stella clenched her pen, but spoke softly, careful not to mistake silence for emptiness. They turned, startled by her quiet boldness. From a distance, Henry caught the scene and tilted his head. There was fire where they had expected submission. On the balcony, the wind carried a hint of winter. Henry stopped at the railing, gauging the drop below. After a near fall, the view changes, he admitted. Sometimes we only see the height when the ground disappears, she replied. He glanced sideways, absorbing the metaphor without defense. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, just dense. A call from the event manager broke the spell. Bianca, his image consultant, swept in with perfume and urgency. Henry, board photos, no staff by your side. Her eyes skimmed over Stella like dust on crystal. Optics matter. Don't feed the tabloids, she ordered. Stella is working, not posing, he answered firmly. Bianca bit her lip, irritated by the pushback. But his word ended the matter. As they exited, flashes burst like a summer storm. One photographer caught Henry holding the car door for Stella. Bianca sighed loudly, already imagining the poisonous captions. I'll manage the noise, but expect headlines, she warned sharply. Henry ignored her, choosing the battles worth fighting. Stella adjusted her clipboard, carrying her own shadow. Neither trophy nor shame, simply presence. Back on the hill, the gates swallowed them into safety. Sorry for dragging you into that stage, he said. I stand firm where my work belongs, she replied. If you want, I'll reassign you to another house in the group. I'd rather stay where I'm useful, not invisible, she said firmly. Henry nodded, respecting the boundary she traced. Limits, too, were a form of care. In the office, he slid an envelope toward her. Addendum, confidentiality, and bonus. For extraordinary duty. Stella read it line by line before raising her eyes. I'll add a clause, fair time off for the whole staff. Henry stared at her, surprised by the collective bargain. Deal, he said, signing without theatrics. Elvira overheard and swallowed hard as she prepared to leave. Henry's sleeve snagged on the door handle. The fabric tore in a neat line. Along the seam, Stella grabbed needle and thread, her hands steady, without hesitation. Hold still, 1 minute, she said, focused. His wrist close to her face set the air ablaze. You mend falls and sleeves, he murmured low. And sometimes silences, she finished, tying the last stitched eye in her modest room. Stella slipped off her shoes in silence. The night still vibrated in her bones, between gala and staircases. She thought of the closed piano, the handrail, the new agreement. She thought of his eyes when he said trust. An envelope slid under her door without a sound. Inside, a crooked note. Watch the stairs. The chill she felt didn't come from marble. The note slipped under Stella's door, refused to leave her mind. The crooked letters, almost scribbled, didn't look like Henry's. It wasn't a warning. It was a threat disguised as a joke. In the hallway, footsteps echoed past midnight, and she held her breath. The other servants were asleep, but the air felt far too heavy. She tucked the note into her drawer, saying nothing to anyone. In that mansion, luxury and danger seemed to walk hand in hand. The next morning, Henry came down for breakfast earlier than usual. He found Stella arranging flowers in the dining room. Her fingers trembled slightly, and he noticed. Rough night? He asked, more observant than usual. Just the wind, she replied quickly, avoiding his eyes. Henry didn't press, but he registered the stiffness in her gesture. He stored it away like a number memorized for later. The newspapers on the table carried headlines from the gala. One photo showed Henry holding the door open for Stella. The caption hinted, housemaid, or new intimate assistant. He folded the paper with force, the crack loud as a verdict. Don't pay attention to that, Stella said firmly, unflinching. I've been used to side glances since the day I started working. Henry looked up and saw something rare in her: resilience. That afternoon, Stella was summoned to the office. Henry stood by the window, staring out at the gardens. "I need you for something different today," he said. She frowned, waiting for unusual instructions. "Come with me downtown. No gala, no luxury." His tone carried mystery, but no arrogance. Something in his voice sounded almost human. In the car, the silence was dense but not hostile. Stella watched the city transform as they descended from the hill. From mansions to streets full of small shops and children running. Henry kept his gaze fixed ahead, as though guarding secrets. Suddenly, he parked in front of a simple building. "Come with me," he said, stepping out without waiting. Stella hesitated, then followed, intrigued. The place was an old warehouse turned community center. Children ran, volunteers handed out food and clothing. And in the middle of it all, Henry was greeted quietly. No flashes, no cameras, just silent respect. "He helps here," whispered a worker to Stella. She was stunned. The man called cold on the outside. Here, he was the anonymous pillar holding lives together. Stella watched Henry unload boxes from his own car. Books, toys, food, none stamped with his name. "You do this often?" she asked, incredulous. "When I can. I don't like people knowing," he answered flatly. "Why not?" she pressed, moved by what she saw. "Because charity for headlines isn't charity, it's marketing." And for the first time, Stella saw pain in his eyes. While she helped, a boy walked up naturally. "Thank you, Mr. Henry," he said, hugging his waist. Henry ruffled the boy's hair with unexpected tenderness. "Study, grow, be better than me," he whispered softly. Stella captured every detail of that fleeting second. The image shattered his armor into invisible pieces. And silently, she began to see another man. On the way back, the car smelled of cardboard and laundry soap. Stella couldn't hold back the curiosity burning inside her. "Why hide this? Why don't even your staff know?" Henry sighed, keeping his eyes on the road. "The last time I showed it, they used it against me. Called it a facade. So, you'd rather be called cold than fake?" "I'd rather not have to prove anything to anyone," he concluded. The words struck Stella deeply. She knew judgment too well. Yet something still gnawed at her, the mysterious note. Her silence made him ask, "What are you hiding from me?" She hesitated, staring at her own fingers. "Someone slipped a note under my door yesterday." His eyes sharpened like a blade. "What did it say?" he demanded. "Watch the stairs," she answered, voice trembling but steady. Henry's hand clenched the steering wheel, knuckles whitening. "You think it was a joke?" "It didn't feel like one," Stella replied, the weight pressing her chest. He pulled abruptly to the roadside. "Show me when we're back. And don't keep anything in silence again." The command carried more fear than anger. Back at the mansion, Henry studied the note. "This isn't anyone's handwriting from the staff," he declared. "It could have been slipped in from outside, door left unlocked." Stella recalled the footsteps in the corridor at night. "I heard someone walking. It didn't sound like staff." Henry's jaw tightened, sensing something larger at play. "The past I carry doesn't just knock at my door." The phrase betrayed him more than it should have. Stella noticed, but didn't press him yet. "If there's danger, I need to know," she insisted. "And what would you do, Stella?" "Fight ghosts for me." "Not ghosts. People. And I've already learned not to run." He stared at her, struck by the strength in her simple words. For the first time, silence became his only answer. A tea dinner. The air between them was tense. Elvira noticed, but chose to ignore. Henry barely touched his food, lost in thought. Stella stayed alert, studying each flicker of his expression. At one point, their eyes locked, too long. It was a silent war of mistrust and protection, and neither seemed willing to retreat. After dinner, Stella carried the tray calmly. Henry followed her into the kitchen, unnoticed by the others. "Don't walk the halls alone at night," he warned. "Are you saying there's real danger here?" "Inside, I'm saying I don't want you hurt because of me." She drew in a breath, surprised by the hidden vulnerability. "I've been hurt less saving you than ignoring warnings." Her reply drew a short laugh from him, half disbelief. "You're impossible," he said, shaking his head. "Impossible or necessary," she countered, biting her lip. For a moment, the air grew heavy with something beyond fear. He turned away, sliding back into his rigid mask. "Good night, Stella," he said, closing the exchange. But his eyes told another story. In her room, Stella thought of Henry's many layers. The cold boss in headlines, the silent man in the corridors, and now, the secret benefactor of forgotten children. Each piece seemed contradictory, yet all felt true. She wondered how many more falls still surrounded him, and why someone wanted to remind her of them through threats. Sleep came late, weighed down with questions. Meanwhile, Henry wandered alone into the library. His fingers brushed the keys of the closed piano. An unfinished melody emerged, thick with melancholy. He stopped mid-song, staring into the void. The memory of Stella holding him at the staircase cut through his mind. It had been years since anyone kept him from falling, and that disarmed him more than any rumor could. In the hallway, shadows shifted soundlessly. A figure watched through the crack of a half-open door, cold eyes fixed on Henry like a patient predator. The note had only been the beginning, a warning. Shot. Now, the game seemed ready to start. Stella, unaware, was already on the board, and Henry had no way to keep her from being the central piece. The night wind beat against the mansion's windows. Stella tossed restlessly, heart uneasy. Henry played broken notes, like a silent plea for help. The figures slipped away down the corridor, promising to return, and their fates were already irreversibly entwined. Between falls prevented and hidden threats, a bond was born, but neither of them knew how high the cost would be. Dawn arrived like a heavy curtain over the hill. Henry remained in the library, the piano half open, silvered by moonlight. Stella, still unsettled by the note, retraced her steps in her mind. Too many risks to be coincidence, too much silence to ignore. The mansion seemed to listen, breathe, answer in subtle echoes. Elvira cleared the last cups with her usual precision, and in the air lingered a premonition, like dust refusing to settle. By morning, Henry summoned Stella to the side veranda. The breeze carried the scent of wet grass and polished wood. "I want to reinforce internal security," quietly, he said, concise. "Lock changes, camera reviews, access routes." Stella nodded, jotting it down with loyal attentiveness. "I also want your read on the staff, beyond Elvira's reports." He had chosen her as his compass, and it weighed sweetly. On the monitors, 2 spots blinked with odd delays. Service corridor cameras went blind for minutes at a time. An intentional loop, Henry assessed, eyes narrowing. "Someone who knows the system," Stella added, frowning. "Few have access. Maintenance, security, head of household staff." A short list felt worse than a long one. When danger knows the shortcuts, the maze belongs to someone else. Elvira appeared with reports, her face clean of emotion. Routine's normal. Inventory matches stock. Henry skimmed, suspicion sniffing at cracks. "And the night before?" "Last?" he asked, casual as a strike. "Ran without incident," she replied, not blinking. Stella and Henry exchanged a look that said, "Not enough." Truth loves to hide in neatly pressed pockets. Later, Henry asked Stella to meet him in the music room. His fingers touched 2 notes, stopped, returned. "I began this piece before everything collapsed," he said softly. "Before what?" she asked gently, without intrusion. "Before a costly betrayal and a fall that didn't bruise." On the outside, the word fall hung suspended, floating between keys. He drew in breath, as if opening a long-closed window. "My partner, Victor Lang, was family without blood," he began. "He joined me when no one else would, learn the map of the vault. Before I knew it, the vault was empty and the press filthy with scandal. They painted me as the villain, and I nearly believed the role. I shut down, as if music and people were equal risks. But the notes never returned, just this broken melody." Stella listened, offering no quick fix, only presence. "And the fall?" she pressed, touching the invisible wound. "Where you see stairs, I see edges of childhood," he said. "My mother fell down a narrow staircase in a crumbling house. I was 8. Spent my life installing inner handrails. In buildings, in companies, inside myself. And even so, one careless trip, almost." He stopped. Silence finished the sentence too heavy to write. Stella placed her hand firmly on the piano's edge. "Handrails prevent falls, but they don't teach how to walk. You've been clinging to the metal, Henry. Sometimes you have to let go and breathe." He looked at her like a man finding air after a dive. "Who taught you to speak like that?" he asked, almost smiling. Life. And a few slippery floors, she replied. The almost smile gave way to a sharp crack overhead. A metallic sound, brief, above the chandelier. Stay behind me, Henry said, reflexes swift. Stella looked up, spotting the bolt loosening. That fixture was checked last week, she whispered. The creak turned to a snap, and the chain gave way. They both stepped back, seconds before glass shattered. Shards rained cold across the Persian rug. Elvira rushed in, pale, hand over her mouth, struck dumb. Accident, someone muttered in the hallway, too quickly. Henry's eyes tracked the ceiling, in line with the cameras. Accidents repeat patterns when they have an author, he murmured. Stella crouched, examining the broken link calmly. Clean cut, not wear. Scissors, not time. Maintenance staff arrived, sweating excuses. There was no work order on that fixture, sir. Accessing the chain requires the electrical room key. The keys, logged, pointed to 3 possible names. One of them swallowed hard, seeing the record on the tablet. Stella noted it, catching the faint tremor of his thumb. When truth trembles, the hand says more than the mouth. Henry dismissed everyone, keeping only Stella in the room. They'll seal the ceiling. I want the raw footage now. She pulled up the server, skimming menus with sharp precision. 2 minutes of technical blackout framed the chandelier's break. Same loop as the back corridor cameras, she said. A signature, someone repeating the same trick. Henry nodded, cold anger heating once again. Victor? Stella asked, the name slicing the air. He vanished off the map, but left apprentices and debts. Whoever sabotages wants to corner me. Fear or exposure. And you? She challenged, eyes steady, chin lifted. I choose to protect people. The rest will face. Then I stay, Stella said, calm fire in her voice. Staying is the highest choice of all. Bianca burst in, perfume masking. The scent of glass. Henry, the press already has photos of the shattered chandelier. Someone leaked from inside. They're saying you staged attacks. Stella closed the laptop, suppressing an urge to respond. I'll handle it. Henry cut in, refusing to feed the flame. Bianca cast Stella a look, half calculation, half curiosity. Careful with moral staircases, she needled. Leaving. That night, the piano breathed unfinished notes again. Keep going, Stella urged, sitting on the bench beside him. I don't play for audiences, he protested, the old wall rising. I'm not an audience. I'm a room built for one. He let out a short laugh, defense cracking at the edges. His fingers yielded, and the melody betrayed an old tenderness. Stella leaned into the rhythm, as though holding a rope. When the music stopped, the world felt closer. You're not the man of the rumors, Henry, she whispered. And you're not the maid who lowers her head, he replied. For a moment, the distance shrank to nothing but air. Their breaths met in the middle, thick with words unsaid. Then a sharp noise on the service stairs broke the spell. Stella rose first. Henry was already beside her. On the narrow landing, a side rail lacked 2 bolts. Whoever did this worked fast, Stella assessed, serious. They wanted accident, not renovation, Henry added, jaw tight. A hooded figure rushed down 3 flights, oil scent trailing. Stop, Henry shouted, but the echo was the only reply. Stella raised her phone, catching 2 usable frames. Worn boot, pale laces, a fleeting tattoo on the wrist. Back in the library, Henry handed her ice for her wrist. You shake less than most men I know. I've learned stability starts at the heel, she smiled. He noted the faint redness on her arm, too concerned to hide it. Tonight you don't walk anywhere alone, not even the kitchen. I'll follow, but on one condition, transparency, she said. Half the falls come from what we don't say. Henry exhaled, opening a drawer he rarely touched. From it, he pulled a dossier of photos, dates, suspicious transfers. This is the maze Victor left lit. If you'll be my eyes where mine don't reach, we'll move together. Stella took the folder as though accepting a mission. I will, but on one condition, don't sacrifice me in the script. I promise handrails and truth. He sealed, solemn that as she left. Stella brushed her hand over the piano lid. Finish this piece when this chapter ends. Maybe the notes will flow when the ground stops collapsing. He nodded, feeling the weight of a gentle challenge. From the corridor, the wind carried a faint, glassy laugh. And still there was warmth, Two allies, a pact, a sound. Love, like certain melodies, is born from what a fall cannot steal. The morning broke gray, with low clouds hiding the sun. Stella entered the kitchen earlier than usual, still breathless from a restless night. The dossier Henry had given her refused to leave her mind. The photos, the dates, the names, all screamed. Danger in invisible ink. As she stirred the coffee, every sip felt like silent preparation. Henry appeared at the doorway, immaculate in his suit, but with deep circles under his eyes. "Sleep well?" he asked, and she almost laughed at the irony. "Not exactly," Stella replied, raising the cup with a trembling hand. Henry walked to the counter and grabbed a piece of bread absent-mindedly. "Some days the ghosts weigh more than the contracts," he murmured. The silence between them stretched tight, like a wire about to snap. "You trusted me by giving me that dossier. Now you need to trust what I'll do with it." "And what exactly do you intend, Henry?" she pressed, steady. He drew in a breath, as if deciding whether to show a scar. "I intend to track his trail before he knocks me down again," he finally said. "Victor doesn't act alone, and now we know it." Stella set her cup down slowly, her heartbeat quickening. "And me? What's my role in this hunt?" she asked, her calm forced. Henry studied her for a long moment, weighing how much. "To expose. Your role is to remind me not to lose myself in this war." The answer was so unexpected, Stella couldn't hide her blush. That afternoon, they gathered in the main office. Maps, spreadsheets, and records covered the desk like a war table. "Look here," Stella pointed to a bank statement. "The transfers line up with the exact days your stocks plummeted." Henry's frown deepened, the logic tying into a dangerous knot. "So it wasn't bad luck on the market. It was calculated. Sabotage." She nodded, her serious gaze holding his. A discreet knock interrupted their investigation. Elvira entered with a folder in her hands, her eyes too carefully lowered. "Mail, Mr. Hale," she said, avoiding his gaze. Stella noticed her rigid posture, as if hiding something. "Leave it on the desk," Henry ordered without looking up. As soon as she left, Stella murmured, "Did you notice her eyes?" "Yes, but Elvira's loyal. At least, she always was," Henry said, hesitating. Among the letters, there was an envelope with no sender. Henry opened it to find a single photo, Stella leaving the mansion. The angle was recent, taken from the street, as if stalked by a shadow. "My God," she whispered, covering her mouth. "This means it's not just about me, Stella. It's about us." Henry's fist tightened, anger flashing in his eyes. "They've crossed a line. Now it's personal." Stella drew a deep breath, regaining balance. "If it's about me too, then you won't shut me out," she said firmly. "I can't protect you from every angle, Stella." Henry shot back. "Then teach me where all those handrails you've built really are," she countered. He stared at her, surprised by the courage that always surfaced in her. "You don't understand the price this could cost." "I do. And that's exactly why I won't back down," she declared. The tension gave way, briefly, to complicity. Henry opened the bottom drawer and pulled out an old notebook. "My father used it to track every suspicious move in business. If Victor really has someone inside, we can trace it." Stella ran her fingers over the worn pages, feeling the weight of legacy. "Maybe your family's past holds the key to dismantling this maze." Henry smiled faintly, sad and proud all at once. As they analyzed the records, night fell silently. Outside, the fine rain turned the veranda into a mirror. Henry closed the notebook and looked at her in silence. "I don't know if I've ever thanked you for saving my life, Stella." "You did, but it seems you forgot," she replied with a half laugh. "Then I'll thank you again. Because since that moment, something changed." The words hung between them, heavy with something more. Stella looked away, her heartbeat too loud in her chest. "Have you always been grateful to those who helped you, Henry?" "No, I was always too distrustful for that." She met his eyes again, seeing raw honesty there. "Maybe I'm learning now." "Too late," he added softly. "It's not too late as long as we're still standing," Stella answered firmly. They both smiled, a rare, almost intimate smile. A thunderclap shook the horizon, rattling the window. The lights flickered, leaving the room dark for a breath. When they came back, Henry was closer than before. "If I ever fall again, Stella, it won't just be into the abyss." She shivered, catching the double meaning in his words. "I won't let you fall," she replied with conviction. He drew in breath, as though needing to believe that I in the kitchen. Elvira watched through the cracked door. Her eyes carried something impossible to decipher. When she turned away, her footsteps echoed cold. Back in the library, Stella didn't notice the shadow. She was too absorbed by the weight of Henry's gaze, and he seemed torn between fighting and surrendering. That night, the war felt more intimate than ever. Hours later, Stella returned to her room. Another note lay beneath the door. "The truth falls before the man." Her hands froze, her heart racing. She tucked the paper into her pocket and went to the window. From the garden, a shadow slipped behind the greenhouse. "They're watching us every second," she whispered to herself. She knew Henry had to know, but feared alarming him further. In the next room, Henry swirled a glass of wine. Loneliness felt sharper than the drink itself. He recalled Stella's words, "I won't back down." And deep down, it was her courage that made him want to fight. He wanted to protect her, but also hold her close. For the first time in years, his heart refused to obey reason. And that was the hardest fall to resist. The next morning, Stella found Henry in the dining room. He was reading the paper, his expression dark. Another headline: Henry Hale stages sabotage drama. "They want to turn your life into a spectacle, Henry." He tossed the paper aside, frustrated. "Let them think what they want. I don't live for them." "But you live for something, and you need to decide what," Stella retorted. Henry stood, walking to the tall window. "What do you think I live for, Stella?" he asked without turning. She stepped closer, daring to stand at his side. "I think you live between handrails, trying not to fall." He looked at her, the air suspended between them. "And what if I told you I've already fallen, but I don't want to get up alone?" Stella felt her heart leap to her throat. "Then maybe this is the first time you don't have to," she said softly. Henry closed his eyes briefly, breathing deeply. "You don't know what you're getting into." "I do. And still, I choose to stay," she answered, resolute. The silence was broken by the sound of the door opening. Bianca entered, elegant and sharp, her perfume filling the room. "Am I interrupting something?" she asked, raising a brow. "We're discussing business," Henry replied coldly, resuming his mask. Bianca shot Stella a look dripping with disdain. "Dangerous business, I'd say. You should choose your company better, Henry." "You don't decide my company," he snapped, blunt. Shock flickered across Bianca's face, quick but visible. She smiled thinly, masking the wound, and left without farewell. Stella exhaled, surprised by his firmness against his ex. "You need to understand that standing by me comes at a price," Henry said. "I already understand, Henry, and I'm willing to pay it," Stella replied. "Even if it costs your safety, your peace?" "Especially for that. Because peace without truth doesn't exist." He looked at her, more vulnerable than ever. "You speak as if you were my mirror," he murmured. "Maybe I am," Stella answered, holding his gaze. Night fell again, bringing fresh uncertainty. But something between them was already shifting. The abyss wasn't just outside, it was inside, deep and raw. And every word exchanged felt like a bridge under construction. Outside, enemies moved in silence. Inside the mansion, Henry and Stella were learning to face the falls together. And deep down, both knew the greatest fall was still to come. The morning came with a deceptive calm. The storm of the previous night had left puddles shining across the garden paths. Stella walked through the hallways with careful steps, the note still burning in her pocket. "The truth falls before the man." Those words gnawed at her with every breath. Henry was already in the office, tie loosened, staring at the dossier spread wide. The air carried the tension of a battle unspoken but very near. And both of them knew the mansion was no longer just a home. It was a chessboard. "Sit," Henry said, his voice roughened by lack of sleep. She sat across from him, the polished table between them like a trench. "I need to know exactly what you found in these documents last night." Stella traced her finger along a page, steadying herself. "These transactions, they always pass through the same shell company. Hidden, but consistent." Henry's eyes sharpened, storm clouds brewing behind them. "That company used to belong to Victor." The name struck the room like thunder. Henry clenched his jaw, remembering his former partner's betrayal. "Every thread I pull leads back to him," he muttered. Stella leaned forward, her voice calm but firm. "Then maybe the enemy isn't just outside. Henry. Maybe he's inside these walls too. He froze at her words, as if they had given form to his own fears. Silence pressed in like a heavy curtain. Moments later, Elvira entered with a tray of tea. Her steps were precise, her eyes lowered as always. But Stella's gaze lingered, too precise, too rehearsed. Henry dismissed her with a nod, but suspicion flickered in his eyes. When the door closed, Stella whispered, "She's hiding something." Henry rubbed his temples, torn between loyalty and instinct. Elvira has been here longer than anyone. If she's turned. He left the sentence unfinished at by noon. Henry decided to test his theory. He summoned the entire staff to the dining hall. One by one, he announced new security measures, restricted keys, surprise inspections. Faces stiffened, hands fidgeted, eyes dropped. Stella, standing near the back, studied every reaction. And when Henry mentioned camera loops, she noticed a flicker in one man's expression. The head of maintenance shifted uncomfortably, his thumb twitching. After the meeting, Henry pulled Stella aside. "You saw it too," he said, his voice low. "Yes." He's nervous, but nervous doesn't always mean guilty. "Then we test him," Henry replied coldly. They devised a trap, an access log with false entries, left where only he could find them. If altered, they'd know. If not, they'd look elsewhere. Stella felt the weight of their plan, but nodded. Later, in the music room, Henry's hands drifted over the piano. The melody was hesitant, fractured, as though the notes themselves mistrusted the air. Stella watched him, arms folded lightly. "Music only breaks when the heart is carrying too much," she said. He gave her a sidelong glance, half a smile, half pain. "You keep speaking like you've lived inside my shadows." "Maybe because I've had my own," she answered softly. Their words faded into silence, replaced by the music's fragile thread. Then, a sharp crash echoed from upstairs. Henry bolted upright, Stella on his heels. They rushed up the staircase to find a broken vase in the hallway. But the shards lay too neatly, as though placed, not dropped. Henry bent to examine it, his expression tightening. This isn't clumsiness. It's a warning. That night, the trap was sprung. The access log had been tampered with, entries shifted to hide gaps. Henry showed Stella the altered sheet, his anger burning cold. "It's him, the head of maintenance." But Stella shook her head, pointing to the handwriting. "No. Look closely, the ink pressure, the slant. It's too refined, too careful." Henry stilled, realization dawning. Someone's using his name. Down in the cellar, a new discovery waited. One of the backup generators had been disabled, wires clipped with surgical precision. If the lights went out during an emergency, the house would be blind. Stella's pulse quickened. "They're not just threatening, Henry. They're preparing." His hands curled into fists, eyes blazing. "Victor wants me vulnerable. He's closing the circle and dragging me into it," Stella whispered. Henry turned to her then, his expression raw. "I told you staying here came at a price. And I told you I was willing to pay it," she replied, unwavering. For a long moment, neither spoke. Their breaths mingled in the dim light of the cellar. And Henry realized she wasn't just an employee anymore. She was his ally, his anchor, his handrail against the fall, but fate wouldn't let them linger. As they ascended the stairs, a sudden noise cracked through the dark. A figure darted across the hallway, hooded, vanishing through the service door. Henry gave chase, but the intruder was fast, too fast. Only the slam of the exit echoed behind them. Stella clutched Henry's arm, her heart racing. "There, inside, Henry. Whoever it is, they already know us." In his office later, Henry poured himself a drink he barely touched. "Every time I think I'm one step ahead, Victor is too." Stella set the glass aside gently. "You're not alone. This time, that changes everything." He looked at her, the fight in him battling something softer. Her presence was dangerous, but it was also the only thing holding him steady. And for Henry Hale, that was a fall he might not resist. The night closed heavy over the mansion. Shadows moved where cameras should have been watching. Somewhere beyond the windows, laughter carried by the wind. Inside, Stella sat awake, pen in hand, mapping the threats like constellations. In the next room, Henry stared at the piano, fingers aching for unfinished notes. And though they were separated by walls, the same thought haunted them both. The game had begun, and the price of survival was truth. The mansion's silence that night seemed to have a weight of its own. Henry paced the library like a lion in a gilded cage. Every shelf, every painting seemed loaded with suspicion. Stella watched him from the doorway, sensing the thickening air. "You can't carry all of this alone," she said firmly. He sighed, not turning. "If I make a mistake, you'll pay with me." But his voice betrayed more fear than arrogance. The next morning, the headlines cut deep. "Magnate hail. Under suspicion of corruption in public contracts." Stella held the paper, her hands trembling with outrage. "They're fabricating stories. Henry, you can't stay silent." He snatched the paper, crumpling it in tense fists. "If I answer, I feed the circus. If I stay quiet, I risk losing everything." She held his gaze. "And what if truth is your only weapon?" Bianca swept into the sitting room, smiling like someone who wins without fighting. "See, I told you she would be your weak point," she said, venomous. Stella rose, but Henry lifted a hand, controlled. "Bianca, every drop of poison you spit only proves your desperation." She arched a brow, feigning calm, though her mask cracked. "A man like you won't survive with sentimentality." And she left, leaving a bitter perfume behind. Henry leaned on the closed piano, his fingers tapping the lid. "Victor's behind this, I'm certain, but I need the final proof." Stella stepped closer, her touch light on his arm. "Then let's find it, whatever the cost." He looked at her, surprised at her resolve to share the risk. "You owe me nothing, Stella. You already saved my life once, and I'll keep saving it until you understand you're not alone." Mateus brought a folder with coded symbols and bank statements. "This is the thread that ties Victor to the inside attacks." Stella leafed through each page like unraveling a puzzle. "But something's missing, undeniable proof." Mateus nodded. "A testimony or a recording." Henry closed his eyes, recalling Victor's secret meetings. The man always talks too much when he thinks he's winning. They set a dangerous plan: invite Victor to dinner. An elegant invitation, disguised as a business truce. Stella wrung her hands as the note was sent. "And if he doesn't come?" she asked, dreading the silence. Henry smirked faintly. Vain men never refuse a stage. That night, the mansion was dressed like never before. Candles, wine, and the hush of looming confrontation. Victor arrived on time, as if rehearsed. Dark suit, cold smile, eyes like sharpened blades. "Henry, you still know how to host your enemies," he sneered. "Sometimes it's useful to remember. We're civilized," Henry replied. Stella watched from a distance, noting every word. She knew the night was more than dinner. It was a chessboard where any piece could fall. Between wine glasses and slices of meat, Victor dropped barbs. "I hear your finances are unsteady." Henry didn't flinch, simply poured more wine. "Funny how the wrong story always finds a willing mouth." Victor laughed, predator teeth on display. "Stories are currency, and whoever controls the version controls the empire." Stella recorded discreetly, her phone hidden under the cloth. The tension stretched like a rope about to snap. "You always wanted to destroy my reputation," Henry accused. Victor leaned back, triumphant. "No, Henry, I only wanted to prove you're made of glass." Stella's pulse thundered, waiting for more. Victor raised his glass. "I bought your men, your secrets, and soon, I'll even buy your fall." The recording caught every word, every mocking laugh. Stella nearly dropped the phone, but held on. Henry kept control, fire smoldering in his chest. "Interesting, Victor. You always confess when you drink too much." The enemy didn't see the trap. He toasted his own vanity. Mateus, in the next room, received the audio live. The noose tightened like a door with no return. When Victor left, Stella ran to Henry, breathless. "We did it." He handed us everything himself. Henry, however, didn't smile. "He's no fool. If he spoke, it means he has another plan." Mateus confirmed. "He might try to run or strike again." Henry turned to Stella, eyes grave. "Now the risk is higher." She clasped his hand. "Then we face it together." That night, Henry couldn't sleep. He paced the corridor, his footsteps echoing back. Opening the office door, he found Stella asleep over papers. Her head rested on her arms, breathing steady. He stepped closer, laying his coat over her shoulders. For a moment, the weight slid off his back. "You're my only point of peace," he whispered. The next morning brought mixed news. The press began questioning Victor, but doubts lingered. One article called Stella an infiltrator, paid to seduce him. She read it, her heart sinking like stone. "They're using me to get to you," she said, tearful. Henry cupped her face with steady hands. "I won't let them have the power to divide us." Yet despite his words, Stella withdrew in silence. She spent the day working, her gaze distant. Henry noticed, but gave her space. That night, he approached with the recording in hand. "You risked everything to capture this." Her eyes welled. "And maybe I'm the one who'll destroy you." He shook his head firmly. "You're the one who saves me." Mateus brought new intel. Victor planned to flee. A private jet was scheduled that very night. "If he takes off, we lose our chance," he warned. Henry exhaled deeply, already resolved. "Stella, I need you with me." She hesitated, then nodded. "If it's war, I'll be at your side." The decision sealed an invisible pact, the hangar. The air smelled of fuel and urgency. Black cars, guards, and Victor ready to board. Henry stepped forward, his voice. "Steele, end of the line." Victor laughed, as if it were stage theater. "You have nothing on me." Stella stepped forward, raising the phone. "Actually, we have your own voice." Victor lunged, but police emerged from the shadows. Mateus had already tipped off the authorities. The enemy was handcuffed, spitting threats. "You think you've won, but I'll be back." Henry stood cold, almost expecting it. "You won't be back, Victor. This time, the fall is yours." And the siren split the night like a verdict on the ride home. Stella's tears fell freely. "Is it really over?" she asked, afraid to believe. Henry gripped her hand tightly. "It's over for him. But for us, something has just begun." She looked at him, surprised by the tenderness in his eyes. For the first time, Henry seemed free of his shadow. And that made him more human, closer. Back at the mansion, relief seeped into the walls. Elvira embraced Stella, apologizing for her forced silence. "You were more loyal than all of us," she said, moved. Henry watched, his eyes damp though discreet. He wasn't a man of tears, but of truths and gestures. And there, he realized, Stella was the link that held it all. The woman who had saved him twice, from the fall, and from himself that on the veranda beneath the moon. They stood in silence. Henry held Stella's hand, his gaze unwavering. "You're not my mate. You're so much more than that." She smiled shyly, but steady. "Then what am I?" He drew a deep breath. "The woman my heart has fallen for." She leaned her forehead against his, letting the moment speak. And there, on the thread of dawn, love and truth became one. Dawn arrived gently, as though the hill itself was finally exhaling. The news spread quickly. The warrant against Victor was upheld with no appeal. Documents, audio, and Ramos's testimony completed the puzzle. Henry read the prosecutor's email, not triumphant, just relieved. "We didn't win headlines. We won the case," he murmured to himself. Stella stood at the door, her eyes smiling though her heart stayed alert. For a moment, the mansion seemed to straighten its own frames. By noon, reporters crowded outside the iron gates. Henry stepped out, no publicist, his elegance unarmed. "I will answer to justice, not to spectacle," he said steadily. "I respect serious journalism. I reject sensationalism. No soundbites, no raised finger, just calm firmness." From a distance, Stella watched, proud of a silence that spoke volumes. The gates closed slowly, sealing off the noise outside. Elvira came forward, hands clasped, voice trembling. "My son, the debts." Henry spared her the shame. "It's ours to resolve now," he said, signaling his lawyer to renegotiate legally. "No shady favors, everything under contract, in the open." Stella embraced the housekeeper, knowing guilt and fear weigh the same. "Thank you for choosing to stay," she whispered, anchoring her to the present. The hallway smelled of fresh coffee, like forgiveness itself. Mateus gathered everyone in the library, laying out the final map. Jammers, loops, fake keys, shell company, VL group stamp. The web looked simple once untangled. Henry signed the last auditor's report, hands firm, eyes warm. "From now on, handrails in the servers too," Mateus joked. Stella chuckled softly, as though accepting a less slippery world. The house adopted new codes, new habits, and fewer shadows. Bianca appeared that afternoon, with white flowers and a rehearsed smile. "I came to apologize and to offer a bridge with some columnists." Henry listened politely, but didn't offer her a chair. "Bridges that only lead back to the abyss, I don't cross," he replied. Her eyes glistened with wounded pride, almost tears. "Good luck without me," she said before leaving her perfume behind. The door closed like the final applause of an act. Instead of a grand party, Henry suggested a quiet house gathering. Fresh bread, simple glasses, lamplight, timid laughter. "Celebrating honest work is my luxury," he confided. Elvira brought pastries. Mateus shyly strummed a guitar. Stella improvised a clothesline of team photos, clipped with pins. Every face reminded them the mansion was built of people. Fear hadn't vanished. It had simply lost command. Later, in the hush, Henry opened the piano and drew a breath. "I promised to finish," he said, finding the notes where he left them. The melody flowed whole, no stumbles, like a well-built staircase. At the end, he lifted his eyes to Stella, overcome. "I called it handrails," he confessed, almost childlike, "because it was by holding yours that I crossed this floor." She applauded with her hands, and with her heart. They lingered alone in the warm glow of the room. "There's something I haven't told you," Henry began. "Not about Victor or money, but about me. I'm afraid of needing," he admitted, shedding his armor. Stella stepped closer, without pity or haste. "Needing is human. Hiding it is what makes us fall," she replied gently. He smiled crookedly, finding strength in his own weakness. Stella drew a deep breath and opened her own vault. "I filed formal charges against my old employer," she revealed. "It took time, but justice was served. He was held accountable. Silencing me was the first trap of my life." Henry listened with his whole being, no interruptions, no noise. "Thank you for giving me a stage to rewrite that scene." "You wrote it. I just turned on the light," he said tenderly. "And about our contract," Henry began, scratching his neck. "I can't keep seeing you as an employee. It's not fair to you, nor true to me. I want you here as head of governance and trust, and if you'll accept, also as my partner beyond the ledgers." Silence smiled first, then Stella's face followed. "I'll take both roles, for the same salary, truth." The first kiss came without fanfare, but full of destiny. A meeting of breaths that had learned each other's rhythm. The house seemed to lean in, listening, complicit. Henry pulled her gently, asking permission as much as shelter. Stella kissed him back firmly, proving firmness can be tenderness. Time stopped stumbling for a full minute, and neither needed a handrail for that step. The next day, an officer delivered sealed notices. Cases against Victor and his allies would move forward publicly. For once, the press chose facts over gossip. Henry gave 2 brief statements, then returned home. "I don't want to live in courtrooms," he said, removing his jacket. "I want to live where I can hear you play the world." Stella laughed. "I play better when you keep the tempo." They organized a modest fair on the lawn, open to neighbors. Artisans, locals, light music, no spotlights, no speeches. "Business breathes better when it leaves marble halls," Henry remarked. Stella set up stalls, negotiated fair prices, managed the flow. Seeing Henry talk freely, unarmored, became her favorite scene. He laughed easily, like a man who had forgotten how to fall. The evening smelled of sweet rain and new beginnings. As they folded the tents, the sky turned impossibly gold. Henry held one rope, Stella the other, laughing at the knot. "We're good at undoing what others tighten," she teased. "And tying what deserves to last," he answered softly. The wind played with her hair and with his fear. "Stay?" he asked simply, without grand speeches. "I'll stay," she replied, offering her hand as home. That night, the veranda turned into a dance floor for 2. An old song played from a phone, imperfect but tender. Henry led clumsily, and they laughed at themselves. "Funny, we never danced after the old victories," he mused. "Because those weren't real victories," Stella replied. "The real ones bring peace before applause." He leaned his forehead to hers, thanking her in silence. "I love you," Henry said, plain and unedited. The words landed whole on Stella's shoulder. She closed her eyes, letting her body answer first. "I love you, in what you are, and in what you're still unlearning. In the man, not the myth, not the magnate." He laughed, free of personas for the first time. The sky felt closer than the past. "I have something for you," Henry said, returning inside. He brought a small key, tied to a leather cord. "It's for the studio next to the library." I want it to be ours. A place for crooked plants, crooked frames, and straight ideas. Stella held the key as though it were a beginning itself. So this is our private handrail, she teased. It's our doorway, he corrected, tenderly. They spent hours setting up the studio, dust and promises rising. They stacked books, propped up canvases, opened the largest window. Henry taped a note to the door, free entry. To remind us love isn't a locked room, he said. Stella leaned against the frame, pulling him in for another kiss. No lock, but it has an address, she whispered, smiling. The shadows respectfully withdrew, staying outside. Weeks later, the case pressed on steadily, no surprises. The melody handrails became the discreet soundtrack of their days. Sometimes Henry played, sometimes Stella drummed along the table. Their laughter filled the spaces where echoes once lived. It wasn't perfection, it was a chosen path, step by step. And every staircase seemed less steep with their hands together. The hill, at last, had more open windows than closed ones. That if this story touched your heart, come closer. Share in the comments which scene held your hand the tightest. Write handrails or drop a musical keyboard so I know you stayed until the end. Like this video, share it with someone who needs solid ground. Subscribe to Beyond Fortune channel and hit the bell icon. Here, every week, stories of falls and new beginnings find a voice. Thank you for being with us. See you in the next chapter.